All right. Daniel is going to read.
I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure, enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly, for what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, and there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this is also vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and a striving after the wind. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart from which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. There's nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind.
Thanks, Daniel. Let's pray. Lord, I pray for your Spirit to guide and direct us, Lord. Instruct us in what we need instructing. I pray that your truths will be not foggy, but very pronounced. And Lord, I pray that we will respond appropriately. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you were wondering what he was reading there, I realized we didn't say. That was chapter 1, starting in verse 12 and going through all of chapter 2. So big text. So I'm not going to be necessarily going verse by verse in this whole thing. It's more of a concept by concept anyways. So if you were new to this, I actually would recommend going back to last week. If you want to go online and find the sermon, it's on our website, and actually get a little bit of the background of Ecclesiastes, where we're going with this, that kind of thing. It's a preset, if you will. Has anyone heard of Viktor Frankl? A couple people. Yeah, my wife is like, of course. You talk about him all the time. Viktor Frankl was a man who was a Jewish man who lived during the Holocaust in a concentration camp. He was a psychoanalyst, and he actually did an analysis of someone living in a concentration camp. The book is called Man's Search for Meaning. When everything is stripped away, the question is, where does somebody find meaning? It's a fascinating book. It's kind of horrifying in many sections as you go through it. But at the same time, he's trying to get to the point of what is the point to life? What is the meaning of life? This morning, though, we have the exact opposite. We've got this man Solomon, or at least some form of Solomon. Somebody writing is a personification. I'm just going to call it Solomon. And he's doing also really an analysis of what is the meaning of life. But unlike Viktor Frankl, who was stripped of everything, human dignity, all of it, we are on the other side. We've got a king over a land, wealthy beyond compare. He's wise, he's smart, and he's going to go try to find in stuff and things and wisdom, what is the point to life? And so I think it's actually really profound, because we actually live kind of in between, don't we? We don't have everything, and we don't have nothing. We are all standing here today with some dignity, right? But the exercise that Solomon is doing, this great test, if you will, that he's going to be embarking on, is with all the money and power and intelligence of the human. And he's going to be asking the exact same question. What is it that we find meaning in? You know, we often ask that question. We look for it in many things, and that's exactly what he's going to do. If I only had this house, if I only had this car, if I only had the right job, if there was only this perfect church, then my life would have meaning. Maybe it's your health. If I was only healthy, then I would have it. Or that particular treatment to fix the problem that you have. If I only had that, then my life would have purpose. Then it would be complete. Solomon's going to say, okay, if blank, if you had that thing, is it really going to bring meaning? Because he's going to have it all. Let's pick up this grand experiment that he's going through, starting in verse 12. I, the teacher, have been king over Jerusalem, over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to examine and explore through wisdom all that has been done under the sun. God has given people this miserable task to keep them occupied. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun, and I have found everything to be futile, a pursuit of the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, see, I miss wisdom far beyond all those who will ever be before me in Jerusalem. Jerusalem before me. And my mind has thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. I applied my mind to know wisdom and knowledge, madness and folly. I learned that this too is a pursuit of the wind. For with much wisdom is much sorrow. As knowledge increases, grief increases. I said to myself, go ahead. I will test you with pleasure, enjoyment. What good? But it turned out to be futile. So he's on this great quest to understand what is the point of life. He begins actually telling us his conclusion. Well, thanks. He says it's futile. The thing is, we have to remember, as I talked a little bit about yesterday, he actually has parameters for what he's doing here. His parameters are under the sun. What is under the sun? Pretty much everything that humans do, physically do, whatever we work, whatever we pursue, it's all under the sun. So his parameters for looking for meaning is under this sun. He says that it's futile. It's like chasing after the winds. Actually, the word could be shepherding after the wind. Imagine shepherding the wind. Kids, have you ever chased the wind? You haven't? I have. I've never caught it. Because you can't. That's the point. The wind's there, but you can't ever do anything. You can't tame it. So he says he applies his mind. Now, can you do that first slide, Tanya? Yeah, that one will work. You can actually go to the next one. This one, if you see, there's several different colors, and I realize you can't even read it. This is actually part of the text. The yellow is mind, and the green is futile, and the other ones are chasing the wind and such. But go ahead and move on to the next one. There you go. He says that he's applying his mind. Now, if you have a different translation, it may say heart. And this word is actually the word leb, which is the innermost part of a man or a being. It's your innermost being. So it is a mind, but it's not strictly the mind. And the reason I bring this up is because he's not just doing an intellectual pursuit. Neither is he just doing a feeling pursuit. He's doing both. He's really himself trying to understand, what is the point? It can't just be an intellectual exercise, and it can't just be an emotional. It's got to be both. What is the point of my life? So he's not just thinking it. This word pops up 12 times in our text. That's a lot. Over and over again, he's saying, I'm doing this pursuit. I'm doing this pursuit. He's going to use wisdom as he follows his heart. Now I use that because we have another term for follow your heart, but use it as this way of understanding that he's following his heart. He's going to use wisdom as the means. He's going to study it as he searches. And what's he going to do first? That's the question. Here it is. He's going to pursue multiple things, but he begins with the thing that I think most of us actually start off pursuing, which is pleasure. He's going to look at pleasure. He's going to look at different aspects of pleasure, what brings us that temporary joy, and look and see, is this actually going to bring meaning to my life? He said about laughter, it's madness, and about pleasure, what does it accomplish? I explored with my mind the pull of wine on my body. My mind still guiding me with wisdom. How I grasped for folly until I could see what was good for people to do under the sun during their few days of their life. So he's going to pursue multiple things. He begins with, yes, he's saying that laughter is madness. How does he know that? Because he pursued laughter. Maybe entertainment. It's not the word for entertainment, but it is the word for laughter. And frankly, I love laughing. Studies show that it's actually really good for you. The thing is that it can't actually last, right? Like, you watch a comedy special, and as soon as it's done, you're like, oh, that was fun. Now what? My friend James, and who also pastors Radiant Church in Anchorage, he and I were at this retreat together, and so was my brother. And if you know anything, I'm a younger brother, so I tease my older brother, and it's fun. I'm not being mean, it's just fun, right? It's a little, and so here we were at Moose's Tooth, and we were talking, and I started mocking my brother, and then it became really funny. I don't even remember what it was. And James and I are laughing so hard, like we can't eat. We're barely in the chair. We're laughing so hard. Well, my brother is telling us to stop. We're going to get kicked out, which makes it only funnier. And it becomes funnier and funnier the more he stop. Hey guys, stop. Hey you guys, right? And so we walk out, and James and I are like, man, that was amazing. I haven't laughed that hard in years, just crying, laughing. And his phone rings, and James pulls out his phone, and somebody in his church that had a tragedy. Immediately, we went from pure joy to just complete devastation. Like that. The problem with laughter is that it doesn't last. It's short-lived. It can flip from laughter to a tragedy, and when you laugh in the midst of a tragedy, it's gross, right? The Postal Service, I'm dating myself, the band, has a line that says it's not a party if it happens every night. It's true. Not a party if it happens every night. He says that this is foolishness. It doesn't last. It's short-lived. It's hevel. And the same thing with wine, the same thing, whatever the physical pleasure that you go for, whether wine or whatever it is, drugs today. And here's the problem, is that it doesn't actually last. It may be fun for a little bit, but it doesn't last. And then sometimes, just like laughter, it leaves you feeling even more meaningless than before. Let's read verse 4. I increase, so he changes. He says, okay, so that kind of pleasure, okay, that's not working. So then he goes, for this kind of pleasure, I increased my achievements. I built houses and planted vineyards. Here we go, as a productive type of pleasure for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself and planted every kind of fruit tree. I constructed reservoirs for myself, for which to irrigate the groves and flourish the trees. Just pause for a second. So he goes to be productive. These are things of wealth. He's got wealth on his hands. He then goes on to say that he collects slaves. When we go, oh, yeah, but at that time, that was a thing of wealth. You have people. So it's just about possessions, what projects he has, and the pleasure that he gets from accomplishing these things, right? You guys enjoy when you finish a project? For sure. But this guy is going way beyond any of yours. Sorry, Joanna Gaines, it's not a rebuild of a house. It's a full-off mansion, huge mansions. Not only that, the guy constructs arboretums. Have you ever been to a giant arboretum? They're fantastic. They're beautiful. Plants curated, everything. He didn't just plant those. He actually did water canals to actually feed these things. This is like a whole nother level. Huge gardens. The problem is, as you start to build those things, you also have to maintain them, don't you? I painted our house in the interior 3 years ago, and I was looking at it, and I was like, oh man, I need to paint it again. It just never ends, does it? The more you acquire, the more that you build, the more you actually have responsibility to keep up, and it just keeps going and going and going. And after you finish a project, that's great, but really, what is there in that? What do you have when you have wealth? You just have stuff. So he continues on. Verse 7, he says, I acquired males and female servants. I had slaves who were born in my house. I also owned livestock, large herds, flocks, more than all who had been before me in Jerusalem. He assembles gold, and he gathers men and women for himself, concubines. And then he also has singers. Like, this guy he's not just acquiring stuff, he's actually acquiring people. This guy could go play golf on the golf course endlessly. He could go on any hunt he ever wanted to. He could hire the best babysitter / nanny. He could go out to the greatest restaurant every single night. He could have the biggest boat. You name it. He has the best retirement plan. He has the best medical providers anyone could ever have. He has people that perform for him when he wants them to. Forget going to the concert comes to him. He doesn't need to just sing in the shower to a song. He can have them sing to him while he's in the shower. Here's what he's doing. He's using people for his own pleasure. He's tried stuff. He's tried his achievements. And now he's using people, as people do, to try to provide his own pleasure. Next, he moves on to power and esteem. Verse 9. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also remained with me. He's still cognitive. He's still knowing what he's doing. He's intentionally moving to the next things. All that my eyes desired, I did not deny them. Whatever he desired. How much? Anything he desired. I did not refuse myself any pleasure, for I took pleasure in all of my struggles. This was my reward for all my struggles. So he's continuing. He's also powerful. He's got power. He doesn't like somebody, you're dead. He's the big man on campus. Everyone likes him. Everyone wants to be, even if they don't like him, they can't do anything about it. And here's the thing, is he began to sit back and to enjoy it, and he can't. Let's read verse 11. Let's see what it says. When I considered all that I had accomplished and what I had labored to achieve, I found everything to be futile. A pursuit of the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. No matter what he did, there was no gain. That word accomplished, it's not just productive, it's actually rightfully translated, if you were going to do a literal, it's like what my hands have done. Whatever I have touched, anything that I've done. He says the work never ends. There's never fulfillment. And no matter how much ease I think I'm going to have, no matter how many people I have to please me, it's never enough. You know, it's interesting. We live in a time where, and I talked about technology before, but I think it's actually, we rest a lot in technology, especially for our comfort. I was thinking very basically, we have lights. Pretty cool. Just think about it. Before lights, we would have been sitting in darkness, right? Maybe a candle here or there. But a light. And we go, you know, that is a privilege. I'm going to sit back and now I can read. But you know what else the lights bring? You can now work in the dark. Oh, now you work night shifts. Now you work whenever. Not just when the daylight's out. You work whenever. Well, what about remote work? Well, I get to do my own schedule, don't I? I just plan my own schedule. I can work when I want to. There's a problem. Anybody work from home? There's a problem here, isn't there? It's not so much that you just work from home and you pick your own hours. It's actually now becoming that you work all the time because you're always on call. You're always available now. There's no punch in, punch out. It's just all the time. Your work is always there. The comforts that we often try to make ourselves actually turn bitter. And I think it's part of what he's getting at here. Like, no matter what I do, it's never complete. I never feel it. It's never enough. And not only that, it almost turns bitter. Like these comforts are now turning, I despise them. So then he turns to wisdom. Now this is interesting. He turns to wisdom. He's tried things. He's tried stuff. He's tried to use people. He's tried to do pleasure. Now he's switching gears. Okay. If they can't be found in pleasure, if it can't be found in the things that I can acquire or what people can do for me, maybe it has to do with wisdom. Proverbs 8:10 tells us that wisdom is better than wealth. So he's right to go, okay, I started with this, wealth, pleasure, and now moving on to wisdom. Here's the question that I often wonder is, do we know the difference between wisdom and knowledge? I'm just going to pause here for a second because I want to make sure we understand that knowledge is something, information that somebody can obtain, they build up. Knowledge can create systems and looks really good on paper. Wisdom, on the other hand, looks at the real world and the factors and applies it. It has experience and knowledge in order to make right and good decisions. You realize that most of our problems that we face, knowledge can't actually help us with. It's like black and white. Knowledge is like black and white. We actually need adaptive, which is wisdom. It needs to be able to adapt to the situation. Where am I going with this? Well, I worked on construction in my 20s. One of the projects, if you've ever been to Fairbanks, was the art museum in Fairbanks. It looks like, I don't really know what it looks like. They say it's breaching whales or icebergs colliding. I don't know. I can tell you this, that some engineer designed it that had never been a builder. And the reason you know that is because I was a concrete cutter and I put about 3 million holes in that place, and then sometimes they were right next to each other. Why? Because there isn't an actual square corner in that building. You see, somebody designed it that had not actually built before. No joke. This is how it works. And so when people actually that came to build it said, none of this makes sense. It looks good on paper, but in real life, this is not exactly how it works, friend. You've missed a lot of factors. And so that project went way, way over budget, many years. In fact, I believe, I couldn't find this, but the company, the general contractor, is no longer in business because of that project. So he started with money, and now he's going to move on to wisdom. Let's see what he says. Verse 18, and I realize that there is an advantage to wisdom over folly. Hey, we're going somewhere. He's found something that's progressing. There's something over this. There's advantage. Like the advantage of light over darkness. That's good. That means you can see. The wise person has eyes in his head. Well, that's good. But the fool walks in darkness. Yet, I also knew that one fate comes to both. Oh. There's a benefit to knowledge. You can see, you can actually mitigate problems a lot of times, right? With wisdom. But the problem is that it's, as he said, one fate comes to both. The wise and the fool. Even if we view the wisest man, things might go well for you until they don't. Until some outside factor barges in. The fate of the fool and the fate of the wise are sometimes the same. You can exercise, be athletic, and eat super well and have cancer and die young. My sister-in-law's dad, great example. Very fit, very healthy, died young of cancer. And so the reality is that reality that we are both going out in the same way, which I don't know if you know this, like there is no dignity when you die for the fool or the wise. You've lost dignity altogether. And what does he say about this? It's distressing. Yeah. Might be an understatement of all that you're saying. This is a distressing thing. Verse 18. I hated all my work that I labored at under the sun, because I must leave it to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will take over all of my work that I labored at skillfully under the sun. This too is futile. He's just saying the obvious. When you die, your stuff goes on to somebody else. No matter how wise you actually were, doesn't matter how wise you are, it's going to somebody else. And the chance you have no determination of whether they're going to be wise with that or not. I had a good friend in high school. His parents inherited the family fortune. And it was a good amount of money. So they went from like fairly poor to fairly affluent. Within 2 years, they bought snow machines, cars. Here's the thing. They were fools at best. After 2 years, none of the snow machines worked. The cars were all broken. The house had been beaten to shreds. It was amazing. I just sat back as a teenager going, what are you guys doing? So whatever amount of money that their ancestors had accomplished, they just spent it uselessly on stuff and then broke it and didn't repair it and just left it. The thing is that I think he's also pointing out not just to stuff, but we in the church, in particular, I think in North America, focus a lot on family. Well, I mean, nucleus family. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we can say that, I'm investing in this family, and as much as you invest in that family, you can't actually make them wise. They may or may not be wise. I heard something this week that it stopped me in my tracks. I don't mean to be depressing, but the comment was made that in 120 years, everyone that's alive on the planet right now will not be alive. Just think about it. In 120 years, not one person that's alive on the planet right now will be alive. All that stuff will be gone. In the end, you go out the same way, whether you're a fool or not. And Solomon says it grieves him. He says he's losing sleep over it. There's a problem, though, with what he's been doing. I'd like to just pause. This outcome that he's having about all of this under the sun, this seeking for wisdom, this seeking for meaning under the sun, the problem is his starting place. He's using wisdom. That's good. That's not bad. In Proverbs 8, we see that wisdom was from God. It was before creation. Of course, God created wisdom, and it's a good thing. The problem is, in order to fully use wisdom, or find meaning, you cannot separate God from those things because He's the creator of it. He's using wisdom, that's good. But where did He start from? Where did He start from? Himself. He's been following His heart. It begins with me, and I'm going to figure out for myself, by myself, who I am and define for myself. The problem is He's a mortal creature with limits, and He lives in a broken world full of sin, and He's full of sin. So what kind of meaning are you going to get from that? It's going to be futile. Proverbs 9:10 says this: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You see the difference there? He began with himself, but he actually should have started with God. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Not my pleasures, not my achievements, not what people can do for me, not even my wisdom itself, but rather God. Where we begin often determines the end result of where we're going. If in our thinking we begin with ourselves. You've probably heard, I think, therefore I am, right? The card. Our response to I think, therefore I am should be, so what? So what then? You think, therefore you are, so what then? It's futile. Maybe you're a Heidegger fan instead. I know, I'm probably the only one that's read Heidegger. It's okay. But his whole thing was that the world's meaning only has meaning because it's connected to us. We're the center of the universe. The problem is that he's actually doing the experiment to try to find meaning himself, in himself, and in the world, and he can find no meaning. The problem with the human search for meaning is that the point is that you're looking for yourself, and what one can achieve, it's always going to end up being futile. Look at verse 24. There is nothing better for a person than to eat, drink, and enjoy his work. I've seen that even this is from God's hand. Because who can eat and who can enjoy life apart from Him? Let's just pause for a second. Oh, wait, actually. Yeah. Did you see there? He says that there's nothing better that you can do under the sun right now than to eat, drink for His work. I have seen that even this is from whose hand? God's hand. Remember what I said earlier? It said accomplished, what that was? It's the work of His hand. It's Solomon's hand. He was discouraged by what he could accomplish, what he did, that it was meaningless, and yet here all of a sudden it's by God's hand that there's actually a point and a purpose. He can actually enjoy. Not only just enjoy food, he can actually enjoy his own work. He's enjoying work in light of the fact that it's by God's hand. He can enjoy it because it's a gift of God. It's a gift from God. If everything you get is from God, then you can enjoy it. Why? God is eternal and you are not. His gifts last forever. We have meaning when we function in how He designed us, which is in relationship to Him. I was thinking about this. A lot of you are in medicine. At least a lot of you used to be in medicine. They used to be here. And I was thinking about it. You can be somebody that patches somebody up, right? You can sew up somebody that has an injury, and that's an amazing thing. But here's the thing, you didn't heal them. Did you? My brother right now just has a knee replacement, and he's sitting in a chair. It's amazing what they can do. They cut a graft in and put in a whole new knee. But he's sitting there right now. Why? Because his body is healing. There's cells that are rejuvenating. There's blood that's flowing, right? That's what's actually happened. How is this actually happening? It's actually by God's hand that he is being healed. Here's the cool thing is, your work, you got to participate in the restoration. So you can take joy in your work, knowing that somebody is being restored, but also resting that it's actually God that does it. Because he could just as easily have an infection and die, right? In that leg. But that's not what's happening. It's actually God that's in control. So you can rest in your work and be like, you know what, that's awesome. It's so good. This is my work. It's awesome. The same thing if you're a parent here today. You're a parent. It's a lot of work to be a parent. It's nonstop, right? If you try to put your hope in the work that you have as a parent and your kid doesn't respond in the way, then you're like, is it me? I'm just a bad parent. Whatever it is, right? Here's the thing is that it's actually God that does the convicting of the heart of your child. So you can do the work, and you should do the work, and be responsible, and discipline in the way that needs to be appropriate, and have the wisdom. Here's the thing, that in the end, it's God that's going to have to convict their heart. And as I was thinking about this, there's no greater joy in that kind of work. Like as a parent, when you see something where your kid responds with a soft heart to somebody lower than them or something like that. Right, parents? That's a fruit. That's a fruit. That's like enjoying what he's saying. The fruit of your labor. I can just enjoy this. If you're in medicine, you see that person running, that you replace their knee, and there they go. That's awesome. I was thinking about pastoring. The greatest joy for me is not preaching. I actually feel sick every year. Every morning I preach. This is not my greatest joy. I do like studying. That's great because I'm a nerd. But the greatest joy is actually seeing when somebody's life is being transformed. There's no greater joy than to watch and enjoy as the Spirit of God transforms somebody. That's the true joy. Martin Luther once said that if this was his last day, he would still go plant his apple tree. If he knew that this was his last day on earth, he would go plant his apple tree. You see, he could rest because the fruit was not actually the fruit of the tree that he was going to enjoy. He could work, he could put his hands on the ground, he could enjoy the planting, and he could enjoy the fruit, but not because he's going to eat that fruit, but because God's the one that sustains him. God's the one that helps him, and he can actually enjoy the work. In verse 25 it says, because you can eat, who can eat and who can enjoy life apart from him? Friends, this is the whole concept really of Sabbath and Sabbath rest. They were to work 6 days. And then even though society around them would say, you need to keep working. I mean, they had Roman overlords that probably told them they had to continue working even in Jesus' time. Like, no, what are you talking about? You had a day off? What is this? No. No, the whole idea is that you can rest knowing that God is in control. Think about your young child. Do they worry about their next meal? You know what? We should probably plan lunch before we go out the door. No, they don't do that, do they? I can just enjoy. They have no concern. There's two people in verse 26. Let's read it real quick. I'll wrap this up. For to the person who is pleasing in his sight, let's talk about God, he gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and accumulating in order to give to the one who is pleasing in God's sight. This too is futile, pursuit of the wind. There's two people. One who is pleasing in God's sight, and then there's the sinner. There's one that's against God. He's against God's authority, against God's structures. He's against God. And the sinner, he is going to continue to work. Did you see what it said there? He's going to continue to work, and eventually his wealth will be passed on. Who? Well, this is potentially talking about eternal, but honestly, it doesn't even have to be an internal that he's passed on to the one that God shows favor. Honestly, it's just going to be passed on anyways because he's going to die. And again, this is futile. That whatever he did, he collected just to give to somebody else. So of course it's going to be futile for him. But the other one, that's different. The other one, God's face is turned towards them. They get to delight in what he has done. Which are you? Which are you? Does your work, are you working to meet that end goal because that's what you need? Are you seeking pleasure to numb whatever you know is futile? Or can you work and enjoy because of who God is? I want you to hear something really quick. Romans 8:20. For creation was subjected to futility. You're like, oh, well, maybe that's a different word for futility. Nope, same word. For creation was subjected to futility. Can you go to the next slide? Look at this. Not that one. There's a verse one. There you go. I've got them highlighted. For creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hopes that the creation itself would be delivered from its bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. The futility of what we do under the sun has a point. You see that? He's saying it's meaningless. Yeah, that's the point. The work that you do under the sun, if that's what you're doing, is futile. Why? So that you will turn and hope in the one that actually created, so that the corruption, be delivered from this bondage of corruption. Isn't that cool? Your futility that you feel should turn you to him, so that you be delivered from this corruption. See, here's the reality. You and I are like the children. I think it's C.S. Lewis. It talks about playing with mud pies when you could have a nice day at the seashore. Right, Lewis? It's that concept here. That you and I, we were like, well, I got to my pleasures, my achievements. He's like, that's a mud pie. What are you doing? I'm going to let that mud get in your eye a little bit so that you're frustrated, so that you can get up and go to the seashore and enjoy yourself for real. Do you feel the futility? God has made it for you so that you might see him. The question is, where are you looking for meaning? If it's in the mud pies, you're only going to find futility. But if it rests in him, then you can enjoy the works of your hands and the work of his hands. Do you find exhausting and meaningless frustration? You may have a wrong starting point. You may be focusing, having your starting point on yourself rather than a God that is forever and who is good and who wants you to be delivered from your bondage of corruption. Let's pray.